Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask Dr. Kurt podcast. Today, we're going to be touching on Zone 2 cardio training, why it's important, how it should be incorporated into your exercise routine, plan, journey to get healthy, de-stressing activity. It needs to be incorporated into your life, especially the older you get. We're going to touch on a few things. First, what is Zone 2 and how do we figure it out and how do we use it? Some of the cell health and longevity and fat burning components of Zone 2. And then we'll kind of see what other rest of the time we have. I try to keep these under 20 minutes so we can just be a quick blast of information and then we can move on. Today is going to be more how do you incorporate it and use it. So this is for the general public. I've heard a lot about Zone 2. How do I use it? What do I do? Well, this is going to be that podcast. If you want to get into some of the cell health of it, we'd have to really deep dive cortisol and cortisol receptors and stress resistance and things. We can do that if there's enough interest. But I like to shoot things out for the general public so we have usable information, not just, a lot of this sciencey stuff that isn't really applicable when you listen to it to everyday life. This is applicable to your life. You can start this today and start moving. So first we need to kind of identify what is fitness. Fitness is defined as your body in motion, your ability to move efficiently with the least amount of stress. So that's what we're going to use as our fitness marker. And what does that really mean is we have to create a healthy energy system response. Zone 2 is a fat burning zone. It's how we train fat burning, which is impacted by stress, impacted by lack of mitochondria or mitochondrial density, which decreases as we age. Some people estimate about 1% to 2% a year. So it's similar to, sex hormones like testosterone and other hormones in men and women that tend to decrease as we age. But mitochondria are more important. They're your energy components of your cells. That's what makes all of your energy. And they thrive on fat. So fat burning efficiency is directly related to mitochondrial density. You can think of them as the same thing, and they train together. So when it comes to training, there's 5 basic zones, and these are in terms of cardio training, heart training, things that would impact your heart rate. Zone 1 is just above moving. So going for a walk essentially could be a zone 1. It's not a very high heart rate. You are burning a little bit of fat, but not a ton, and then we get into zone 2, which is you have to try to do zone 2. There's no just walking the dog or kind of doing little things. You do have to try a little bit to get your heart rate up. And we're going to go over the best method I've found to figure out your heart rate. And then we go into zone 3, which is a little bit higher heart rate, but that zone 2 to zone 3 transition is where your body switches from fat burning into sugar burning. So many of you have heard me say, exercise is stressful. Stress eats sugar for the most part. So that zone 3, once you're crossing into that zone 3 category, now exercise is stressful. You're burning sugar for your primary source of energy. And then zone 4 is a harder, your heart rate's a little bit higher. And then zone 5 is all out effort, kind of think sprints and other things. So think of those are our zones. So zone 1 and 2 are our fat burning zones, with really zone 2 being the primary one. I haven't seen too much evidence clinically that doing zone 1 training seems to help any fat burning. Zone 2 definitely starts to kick it in gear. And zone 3, once people get into zone 3 and 4, which is where a lot of people spend most of their time working out, especially women, because we get the HIIT classes, we get these classes where your heart rate pumps and you get this adrenaline surge at the end and it feels so good. But those are stressful workouts. So we always have to remember burning sugar is a stressor. Some of those stressors can be good and make you stronger, or sometimes they can be added stacked on stress, which doesn't seem to help and can actually kind of keep you locked into an adrenaline high stress state and then not let you reach your health goals. So how do we figure out your zone 2 and how do we do it? Well, first thing we need to do is we need to get some sort of heart rate device so you can see your heart rate. We need to be watching your heart rate because the goal is to keep your heart rate in a specific zone during the whole exercise. And for that exercise, you can do the Stairmaster, you can ride a bike, you can walk it. Walking, you're not going to be able to walk too long once you start training it because you're going to get into a healthy, your exercise endurance is going to build and you're going to have to start improving that. But there's a lot of ways. Essentially, you just want to keep your heart rate in that zone with whatever activity you're doing, which is generally a cardio style activity. So the best way is a guy named Dr. Phil Maffetone. He came up with a method, really easy, seems to be the best route. When you train in this range, everything seems to start to improve. So it's a really easy way. There's watches, there's different apps and things that you can find your ranges. I haven't found those to be as effective as this simple math method everyone can do right on their phones today. If people are more interested in that, just search Phil Maffetone. He has a ton of info. He's a prolific writer. He's a doctor. He did tons of, endurance, trained a ton of endurance athletes and things. Very, very searchable guy. So we do 180 minus your age. So for example, if we do, a 40-year-old man, that's 180 minus 40. So now your number is 140. And there's a few modifiers that we have from there. There's, if you're recovering from a surgery, an illness, something that hospitalized you, some major form of sickness that knocked you out from exercise, you subtract 10. If you haven't really trained in 2 years, or you chronically get sick, or, like for example, a lot of us parents, I'm a new parent, kids bring home sickness and you're always getting sick. You're getting sick 4, 5, 6 times a year. That's going to be modifier B. You're going to subtract 10 or subtract 5, excuse me. Then we have, if you've been training, great. 4 times a week, you're really in on it. You're lean, you're ripped. Everything's good, going well with your training. No change. No modifier. Or if you've been training and you're really hitting it, really in stride, everything's improving, you have to add 5. So it really depends on where you're sitting. If you're really injured, coming off really big injury or sickness, minus 10. If you're just untrained for the last couple of years, minus 5. If you're in really good shape, been hitting it 4 times a week, 4 times a week, really crushing it for the past 2 years, 0 change. If you've really been crushing it and improving and kind of training for an event, you could say, whether that's Ironman or one of the races or High Rocks, there are different things. You're really kind of training and really upping your game. Add 5. So we're actually going to increase our zone 2, which is a movable market. So once you find your zone, then that's the upper limit. So for example, mine, I'm approaching 40. It'd be initially 140. I do have a B. I have a little kid. I haven't been training as much, sadly to say. So I'd have a minus 5. So my range is going to be 125 to 135. So that number you find with the modifiers is the upper limit. And then you subtract 10 and that's your range. So my zone 2 training range is 125 to 135. Now the test, because we don't just need our range, we need kind of a way of retesting the same race, you could say, to kind of get our range of, are we improving? Are we not improving? Is my body stressed? Is it not stressed? How do we go about that? I come up with the 2-mile challenge, which for most people, this is going to be a good challenge, or a minimum of 20 minutes. So what we do is we warm up. We always warm up because as you age, you really need to think about your ligaments, your joints, your blood flow. You cannot go running and diving into these things cold because your body's going to start breaking down and getting injured. We want healthy joint integrity throughout our life. Remember that our fitness definition, we need to move smoothly. So we need to warm up, which is walking, slowly getting your heart rate elevated, we don't like static stretching, maybe some dynamic stretching, maybe certain kind of ways of using a foam roller, not so much to roll, but different ways, strategies. So we need to do at least a 15-minute warm up, if not 30 minutes, depending on our age. Once you're warmed up, we're going to do a 2-mile run, but that run is completely in your heart rate zone. So that means if you have to walk to maintain that heart rate zone, you got to walk. And then we time it. How long does it take you to do 2 miles? If you can crush 2 miles, you're probably a modifier C or D, one of those 3rd or 4th and really in shape. Then we're going to modify this to maybe a 30-minute run, a 40-minute run, kind of whatever your average is so that we can get a standard. And then we time it. And over time, what we'll see improving is that your pace will improve. So your time for those 2 miles will go down. If you see over, for example, we recommend people do this once a month. So you can kind of see, how have I been doing? Let's say the first time you do it, it's 25 minutes to get 2 miles in zone 2. Next month you do it, it's 23. Well, you just improved 2 minutes, a minute a mile. That's a big deal. So now your body starts to get training. And then before you know it, now you don't have to walk at all during your zone 2 run. Now you can run the whole thing, which is really important. We want you to be able to run. Running's a hard movement. It's a hard exercise. It does require, good gait pattern, good foot health. So that's why we're using a jog, a run, as a way to track this. It's a good monitor of structural health, heart health, zone 2 health, everything. So that's how we track it. And we keep tracking it over time. And if you're gaining on your time's going down for your 2 miles, or whatever your time frame is, you're doing more miles in your 30 minutes or 40 minutes. That's a big deal. That means you're improving your zone 2 training. And you should be seeing that in other ways too, in terms of brain health, body composition. If we had fat to lose, hunger, you're probably going to be a lot more hungry because your body's just really turning over fat. So we're going to see a lot of really healthy things happen with that. So that's kind of our way of looking at this. Next, we'll touch on some of the other cool things with zone 2 before we check off for today. Zone 2 is really important for mitochondrial health for a number of reasons. Mitochondria like to burn fat for energy. So zone 2 is our high level fat burning activity. Zone 2 is also very de-stressing. I have a simple way of thinking about this. Stress eats muscle. Well, what does that mean? Stress requires sugar as its primary fuel source. It's if you think if you're running for your life from a lion or a tiger, something that's going to kill you, your body's not trying to burn fat. It's going to dump all the sugar it can and say, get us out of here as fast as we can. Well, in the 21st century, we're living in a chronic state of stress for no real life-threatening reason. A lot of it's all mental stress, which is just driving up our sugars, preserving our fat, not letting us burn our fat, and just adding to a whole host of health problems. So zone 2 is our way of de-stressing the body. It's going to improve the mitochondria. It's going to help us start to burn fat, which consequentially is going to decrease our stress. It's a de-stressing form of exercise. Because remember, once we enter zone 3, which in my case would be a heart rate over 135, it's going to be kicking on sugar. Now we have a stressful exercise plan in addition to our stressful life. Not a good scenario. So a lot of times we really want to train this zone 2. And what's the perfect amount of time for this zone 2 training? A lot of people say anywhere from 2 hours to 3 to 4 hours. I always tell our first goal is to shoot for an hour. If you can't get an hour, then we got to get an hour. And then we start building it from there to maybe 3 days a week, 4 days a week, depending on how much time and you want to throw into each session. Personally, what I find is when I first started this, I could only do about 20 minutes. That minus my warm-up. So I did a warm-up and then I would train zone 2 for about 20 minutes. After that 20 minutes, I found my heart rate started spiking. My body wasn't trained enough to go beyond that 20 minutes. Now we're up to about 40, 45 minutes before we start seeing that heart rate spike at the end, which is a sign my body's now becoming stressed. So it's one of those things where we first have to start kind of just knowing our little rules, our parameters, follow them, and then watch and see what happens as we move throughout that. So I think we can stop here for our initial zone 2 kind of introduction. If you guys are really interested, we want to know a little bit more, we can touch on what it does in longevity. We can deep dive a little bit more into the mitochondria and how fat burning is efficient in de-stressing. We can even dive into what stress does for our fat and fat burning and how it relates to receptors and what we call stress resistance, which is similar to insulin resistance, where in a high state of circulating stress hormones, our receptors become resistant to them, which requires more stress and more stimulus to get things moving. So it's a matter of, we can dive into this a lot of different ways, but I did want to get this introduced so that we have our way of what is zone 2, how do we do it, how do we track it, and kind of going forward from there. So until next time, we'll see y'all later. Bye.